back to Ireland AM. Our next guest has served as a TD since 2016 and served as Government Chief Whip from 2022 to 2025.
She joins us now as the new Minister of State with responsibility for disability. Please welcome Hildegarde Naughton. Good morning to you,
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us, Minister.
Let's start off with talking about disability, particularly around Simon Harris when he was confronted by the care worker Charlotte Fallon back in November. There were calls around that time about bringing in a senior minister for disability. You are here now as the Junior Minister for Disability. Did it show that this maybe disability wasn't seen as a top priority to the government?
Well, I think from Simon Harris's point of view, disability has always been a priority for him, and it's something that it's the reason actually he entered politics. I've been sitting at the cabinet table since 2020, and just previous to this role, I was Minister with responsibility for special education. So it's a nice link into my current role now as Minister with responsibility for disability. And you're right, the fact that I sit at the cabinet table, this is a real priority for government, like it has been in the last government as well.
It's not the senior position, though, that they were hoping for.
Well, I
sit senior cabinet minister. Yes, I know you're there, but even optically wise, particularly what happened down in Kanturk.
Well, how this is going to work is, like, I'm Minister for Disability, but we all know, and I know from when I was in education and special education, disability affects every single government department, be it justice, housing, transport. So I can't do this job by myself, so I have to work with my other government colleagues. And the Taoiseach is also going to have a disability unit within his department, and that's how seriously it will be taken, and it has been taken. So I've been hitting the ground running since I was appointed, meeting service users, families, people who are living with a disability, and that's the way I'll be able to feed into policy and know I'm getting it right, by talking to people with that lived experience.
Well, that's good, because obviously it did feel on the campaign trail, and people felt that there was a disconnect between government and what was actually happening in people's lives. And the HSE have released figures that show over 14,200 assessment of needs for children with a disability. They're now overdue. Yeah. And we're all here to try to make that better. So how are you going to tackle that waiting list?
Yeah, so the assessment of need issue is a big issue, and it's in education. Basically, parents are calling out for assessment of needs because this is all about access to therapists, be it an occupational therapist or a speech and language therapist. And you are correct. There is a large waiting list now for assessment of needs. And what I'm hearing is that a lot of the therapist's time is taken up with actually carrying out the assessment, and not enough time is actually spent on carrying out the therapies, be it speech and language, occupational therapy. So I've met with, for example, the CEO of HSE, Bernard Gloucester, in relation to this. We have 270 extra new therapists that are working within the HSE last year. When I was in special education, we have a pilot now of therapists going into special schools. So dealing directly with some of the most vulnerable children in our society, to make sure that they're getting access to therapists. Because what I was hearing when and I'm still hearing going around the country is, my child is in maybe a special school, and they're, let's say, 11, 12 years old, and maybe they haven't seen a therapist.
Yeah.
That's just wrong. So I have to work with my cabinet colleagues, the HSE, around recruitment of therapists, also looking at what else we can do. So for example, what I did...
How has it gotten so bad? Like 14,000 children. 14,000 children. I mean, your former boss, Leo Varadkar, spoke before about wanting Ireland to be the best country in Europe to be a child, to give them the best start in life. There's 14,000 children who can't even get an assessment. So
one of the issues around the assessment of need is there is a requirement now that it is a really in-depth assessment. And I'm not a medical person or a clinical person, but they're saying that about a third of the assessments that are carried out, assessment of needs, a third of those children don't actually have a complex disability. So maybe they didn't need to have that more in-depth assessment. So people listening today want to know, what are we doing about it?
Yeah.
So what I have done in my previous brief, we have got more therapists now going into third level institutions. So we have 150 extra therapists now gone into first year last September in our universities. That'll take a few years for them to come through. Yeah. The HSE, and this is my conversation with Bernard Gloucester around a recruitment drive to get more therapists into the system.
Can we talk about that a little bit? Because that is an issue with the HSE, because people are leaving. They are not taking jobs within the public system. They're going to other countries and they are going privately. We have an issue within our public sector here in Ireland. We can't recruit. We're not paying enough.
Yeah, so there's a recruitment and a retention issue here around, I suppose, therapists in particular, but across the system. And that's why this week we brought a memo to Cabinet in relation to looking at pay, so Section 38s and Section 39s. Because, and the difference there, if there's two people doing the same job, but maybe they're in different organisations, it doesn't seem fair to me that they're paid differently. So we're looking at ways of retaining the staff, the social care, community, voluntary sector workers that we have who are working in the disability areas right across the country.
Some of them who unions are claiming are being paid below minimum wage. So,
yeah, and
I mean, if you're trying to take those people serious and to try and keep them within the system, the likes of Unite are saying that, yes, being paid €27,000 a year.
For migrant healthcare assistants. We can't get people in we're bringing people in and we're paying them below the minimum wage to do these incredibly complex jobs.
So is this taking advantage of those?
No, I think that's why there's a call to come before the WRC, the Workplace Relations Commission, to make sure that we're now going to sit around the table and that we can address these pay issues. This is really important. Also, the Department of Business, as part of this recruitment drive, trying to find, because we have full employment, this is not just the health sector, it's right across the sector. It's very hard to, I suppose, recruit people across all sectors. But there is, I suppose, an emphasis now when we're even going abroad looking for therapists, for example. There is a priority within the Department of Enterprise around visas and all of that as well. So we have the extra students going into colleges. Also, I think we need to be looking at, maybe there's people working in different disciplines at the moment within the health sector who might want to become a therapist. So how can we upskill people and, I suppose, fast track their qualifications, maybe therapy assistants, for example. What I'm saying is my door is open. Therapies are absolutely critical. We need to make sure that children, everybody with a disability, but particularly those and that early intervention piece, that therapists are able to go into the schools, they're in the community. The public health nurse is sometimes the first person supposed to meet a child or to, engage with a child. Once a baby is born, if they're not meeting those milestones, that needs to be identified early.
By the end of the year, I mean, 14,000 children are wanting assessment. You're saying that you're trying to get people through college, you're trying to get people out of one system into the other. It doesn't sound like it's going to get any better.
That's only one part of it. That's so training, making sure that we are putting more therapists through the education system, but also looking at recruitment.
Can you give us, a statement that you feel that this will improve? Like, how many are we going to get this down to? Because this is a 60% increase.
Yeah, it's taking far too long. So what I have given the commitment, and this is why I'm engaging with the HSE, this is why I'm going to be engaging with my Cabinet colleagues around ensuring that we can get those waiting lists down. What we've done in relation to the assessment of needs is we've made a call to the private sector to come in to do these assessments to reduce the waiting list. They are coming down, but we have to look at other ways of ensuring that therapists are actually carrying out therapies and they're not spending their time with paperwork. And I think there's just too much of that. That's been very blunt and very frank about it.
So when do you hope to actually assess that, where a therapist is sitting there going, I'm an occupational therapist, I have wasted 5 hours of my day here doing a job I shouldn't have done? When do you want to see that change?
I'm sure they're not saying that they've wasted, and parents who want their children to get the assessment of need. So I'm working with the HSE around that and looking at how can we reduce the waiting list by providing extra therapies and also going into the most vulnerable cohorts into our special schools, and also in primary care as well. As I said, when a child is born, if they're not meeting particular milestones, it should not be a surprise when a child goes into junior infants that they have an additional need.
You can get in contact with us 0896 111 111. We've obviously seen what's going on internationally in relation to DEI, diversity, inclusion, equality, people with disabilities. There's been a rollback in relation to those policies from big tech companies in America, so much so that we've seen it here from private companies here. Our own civil service was talking about Forza trade union are trying to fight against them, bringing people back into the office for more days. We were just talking about this last week. We've seen that people with who have a disability, they've been engaged in the workplace more since we have started working from home. More people have started to get jobs, be able to get jobs in the civil service. Is that something that you want to make sure that you can protect?
Yeah, absolutely. And just in the last few weeks when I came into this role, I visited the Together Academy here in Dublin, where young adults or not even young adults with Down syndrome, for example, are working, being trained and taking an active part in society, in their community. The same in Galway. We have the Link Cafe based beside University Hospital Galway. And these are fantastic organisations who work with people with the disability, where you're not just in a day service. If you want to go out and work and contribute, and many of them do, that they are enabled to do that through training, through support, and working with employers to help employers work with people with a disability, if they want to work at home or on site.
We're seeing Donald Trump is rolling back on DEI policies. Is it important? Is DEI important to Micheál Martin?
Absolutely, it's really critical to government, and that's why I'm a minister who's sitting at Cabinet. He has a disability unit in his own department.
Should he not be leading from the front? Should the government not be leading from the front? Boards all across the country being told they have to have 40% at least female to male representation on this. Senior Cabinet is a board, and they have three senior members are women, yeah. I mean, that's nowhere near. It's 20%.
Yeah, and we need to get more women, absolutely, into politics in the first place. I started on the council, in Galway City Council. But I think when people look at politics, and I like to encourage people in. I think it's a really rewarding role, a really rewarding job, but it is difficult being in the public eye, being in public office. But we need to be encouraging more women, I think, to get onto our councils locally. That's where you learn the ropes, and that's where you get comfortable with it as well.
I mean, but he gave 5 women Minister for State roles. Did he not feel that they were appropriate to be a senior cabinet minister? You know, like, we don't want to be giving people jobs for the wrong reasons, but at the same time, it's about empowering people.
Well, I can tell you, I think anyone who gets elected to Dáil Éireann, man or woman, you don't get there without having, I think, the ability to be there and to have worked hard.
So you believe you should have probably been a senior minister, like you're well capable of it?
It's a matter of, well, of course I do. I'm sitting at Cabinet since 2020, and no matter what role I get, I do it to the best of my ability. But I suppose it's not about, my, position. For me, it's about the role that I take on, and I have a very onerous task now, being minister with responsibility for disability. And what I have to do is work with all of my cabinet colleagues, because I cannot do this by myself. I need the Minister for Transport, the Minister for Housing, Minister for Education to work with me, because there's disability in every single government department. And I think my track record and my experience with knowing how government works will help me do that. But just to answer your question, yes, we need more women stepping up as well.
We do.
To this. But I can see why they look at politics and they go, I don't think that's
Well, we've got 3 Jameses at the cabinet table and 3 women. Do you know what I mean? I'm sure some of you looked around someday going, lads, this is gas. But in getting women to go into politics, you're out there in the public eye, and we saw someone who was running in your constituency, Gráinne Seoy, has recently come out, God bless her. There was deep fake images of her sent around during her campaign that were altered so as that it was an X-rated image. We know of 2 politicians in Northern Ireland that had a deep fake pornography movie sent around about them. What's your take on this? Because are we just normalising this, going, this is just going to happen to women in politics? And why would anyone put themselves out there?
It's horrific. That's absolutely horrific. And can I just say, it doesn't just happen to politicians and people in the public eye. It happens to private citizens as well, who are suffering often in silence, who don't have that, the media focus on them to even the fact that we're able to talk about that here today.
Absolutely, but we have to talk about it at this level, because let's be honest, it's denigrating.
It is denigrating, and it's absolutely, it's horrific. And I think,
have you thought about it happening to you?
Yeah, well, I touch wood, but you don't know. It could be out there and you have no idea. But I think we need to be, AI, can I just say, is a very positive, it's a very positive force as well. But from a public, from people looking at politics and saying, well, God, do I really want that life? I can understand why it would turn people off. But I do want to say that being in public life is really, really important. We have a very important role to play. And if people don't step up and be brave, and there is a lot of support there, even within my own party there's mentorships, there's training for women who are interested in getting into
in terms of stepping up and being brave, there's a lot of people and parties are talking about the Taoiseach should boycott the annual trip to the White House this St. Patrick's Day. I know you are going to Japan. What's your take on whether we should be there and show unity with Donald Trump?
I think we always need to be present. This is about the office of president. This is about Irish ministers having access not only in America but right across the world. We're very unique as a small country to have one day in the year where doors open right across the world for us. I think the Taoiseach does need to be sitting at the table there and talking to the President, because you cannot be outside the room. We're in a very unique position, and we have a very good track record in Ireland. Even when I went to the United Nations representing Ireland, the respect that we are held in as a country around peacekeeping, around negotiation. We're seen as a country, if you say something, if Ireland says something, they stick with it. We don't flip-flop on issues. We're very, I suppose, principled, and we were held in very high regard. So I think he does need to sit at that table.
And it's interesting, we have been invited to G20 in South Africa as well, which is something that hasn't happened before. Looking forward to seeing what happens with this waiting list and getting it down from 14,000. Hildegarde Naughton, thank you so much
Thank you
for joining us this morning. We really appreciate it.